Our next presenter is someone I've been watching for a while. If you're on Instagram, you've probably seen this super jack dude do a bunch of really interesting movements in different planes with different modalities and resistance. And I'm an explorer, and I like watching people do cool stuff. And so I reached out, and I was like, hey, man, you don't know me, but I got this wild event in May, and I'd like you to come show us some stuff. So Judd Leinhard is a former military trainer, coach, but his thing is he's always an athlete, and I'm here to learn from athletes, and I'm here to learn from Judd. Welcome, Judd.
Thank you, brother. I'm so happy to be here, man. So, I don't publicly speak very often, so, don't expect to be prepared for something you didn't prepare for. So I went to see a speech coach a couple times before I came. And, basically just make sure I didn't pick my nose up here or something. But I'm not sure he fully broke me of that habit, so in case it happens, sorry. But he basically told me, 4 things, it's like good posture, don't use filler words, don't tell that booger story, and don't cuss too much. But, fuck him, So he said tell one story, keep it brief, so I'm gonna tell 2 fucking stories. So first one's gonna show you that I'm kind of an idiot. Second one, I'm always gonna be a redneck. So Bert Soren DMs me, and I've loved Sorenex forever, cool stuff out there, right? So I was like, oh, this Bert Soren guy DM me. He's got the coolest Sorenex setup. Man, I wonder what this dude does. And he asked me if I wanted to go speak. I was getting inundated, so I checked the DM or something on the road. I didn't pay attention. I gave it to my manager, and I was like, we'll get to it. But I just kept going back to his Instagram. I was like, I love this dude's setup. Is he a hunter? What's he do? God, he's got all this cool Sorenex stuff. It's like, hey, check out this Bert Soren guy. And I was like, 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, Sorenex. So sometimes it takes me a while to stuff to get through to me. But anyway, second story. So 1996, 16-year-old Judd, Missouri, and my wife beat her. Sun's blaring in my eyes because some fucking stupid reason I got my hat on backwards. Me and 4 of my football buddies are hauling hay, and it's a square bale summer. And if you know, you know. If you grew up in Missouri on a farm, square bale summers kind of suck. Because it's my dad, it's like a disease that spreads. It's one farmer will decide that square bales are the way to go, and it spreads. And then when that happens, your summer's over because you just know you're gonna be hauling hay all summer. So we had alfalfa and red clover, which is great and all. It got a good price, but it grows like crazy and it's heavy as shit. So we didn't have a cutting. We had 3 cuttings a summer. My dad would farm us out to local farmers. So we're hauling this dude's hay, and we back up the trailer up to the barn, and how it happens is one of the dudes scrambles up to the top, and he sits there, and then you toss these hay bales up to him, And you're thinking straw bales. Straw bales are 30 pounds, right? These aren't straw bales. First of all, it's a wet cut. Don't cut wet hay, all right? You should know better. And we had alfalfa red clover, so it's just 80 pounds, right? And it's not pretty. So we're trying to throw this stuff up to him, and it's falling on our heads. It's knocking us off the trailer. We're football players. We got little boy muscles and everything. And unfortunately for us, we had an audience of 1, a very judgmental 160-pound, chain-smoking farmer that's, leaning against his trailer, just, judging the shit out of us, right? Shaking his head, And he walks over to the trailer. He, saunders over to the trailer, right? Real dramatic. I'm pretty sure he had a cup of coffee in his hand the whole fucking time, too. So he gets up there, and, he's got this, somehow it's, defied physics. Old farmers had, the grit that just stuck to their mouth somehow. So the grit's just sticking to his mouth. And we're sweating, And I might be making this up, but I don't think he put down a cup of coffee. And he looks at us, and he grabs the hay bale, and with one knee in his hip, he just tosses it up to my friend, and then takes a sip of his coffee. Grit stays in his fucking mouth the whole time. And that was an epiphany for me. It's holy crap, I know I'm stronger than this dude. We're all stronger. He doesn't have glutes, he doesn't have biceps, he doesn't work out. How is this guy able to exert force on this object and I can't? Because at that time, and it took me a while because I'm a slow learner, to me, muscle was performance. But that guy showed me that muscles only matter because muscles are attached to joints. And joints only matter if that joint forms a fulcrum, which produces a lever, which exerts force on the right vector. So that's how muscles work. And that was one of many small formative moments in my life where I slowly began to learn that there's more about physical fitness than muscle mass. Muscles are an important tool, but it's about leverage and it's about physics. So that's gonna get me to what I'm gonna talk about today. I think it's important, you guys see me do a bunch of stuff online, and it doesn't matter, okay? It's not about how creative or cool or weird it is. That's never been my purpose, and it never will be my purpose. I wanna give you guys options, that's all. I love simple, basic, and I love no matter what you do, no matter how big that tree grows, what's the root? Like, what's the acorn? Like, what does everything go back to? And it doesn't matter what that is, but it's gotta be something, right? You have to have a root, a foundation. Mine is force. I already screwed it up. So, let me go back. So what am I gonna talk about today? I'll talk about my background a little bit, force, ways to mitigate risk in vulnerable athletes, and ways to rehab injured athletes. Those are two related but different things. Bands and why I use them. I'm sure some people are curious about why I use bands so much. Different ways to load, which is related. Speed training, especially for adults, and my method or structure. So take a step back. After that, played football in college, learned a little bit more, went out and was a personal trainer in a big box gym. I encourage everybody to do that to appreciate what you have now. Joined the military after that, learned a little bit about tactical training, did a few deployments with 10th Mountain and Ranger Regiment. Got home, kind of went through what I call a quarter-life crisis. I was an ex-infantry officer, and at that point I found out in time my employment options were limited because there wasn't a lot of jobs for ex-infantry officers. I could be a manager in a warehouse, or I could contract, which basically meant for me flying around in an ISR platform tracking targets, and just very limited. And so I had to kind of decide what I wanted to do with my life. And so I had my resume out there. I was CSCS and degree in exercise science and all that. And this guy found me, Acceleration in Austin. He was the only owner. I ended up becoming part owner of it, but I went out there, and when I first got there, it wasn't really what I expected or wanted. But it turned out sometimes what you think are your curses can be your blessings. So none of this stuff, I hear other people that were intentional, and that's good, and I support it. I was unintentional. Sometimes you kind of fall into things, and the path you want to go on isn't the path that works out, but the path that you end up on ends up being the path you were supposed to be on all the time. And it was a lot of kids. I was an elite, I was a freaking Ranger or whatever, and I'm standing in front of this 10-year-old kid that's looking at me doe-eyed, and he's not an elite athlete. And it was kid after kid after kid, hour after hour after hour. It was me and him 7 days a week, literally 12 to 14-hour days of just training kids. How is this gonna make me a great trainer? Don't know how to work stuff. I'll get it sooner or later. So, basically, I have an opposite experience than most of the guys that have already talked here. They have elite athletes that need to be taught the value of hard work because they haven't had to work hard in their life. They have to figure out a way to train large groups. So I've had a completely different challenge. It's been 12 years of almost exclusively one-on-one training, and most of my kids have been what would be categorized as very non-elite athletes, okay? So kids that come in to me that have no confidence, no one's ever believed in them, a lot of times not even their parents believe in them. And I got this more often than I can count. My kid is just tired of being the slowest one in PE class. That is success for him. He just doesn't want to be slow anymore. And as fulfilling, because I have trained guys for the NFL draft, as fulfilling as it is to see, my guy run the second fastest 10-yard split in the NFL draft, that pales into comparison to the fulfillment I got, from the look in the kid's eyes when they come in and they're not the slowest kid in their class anymore. So you're gonna learn a lot more by training kids and non-elite athletes how to teach people how to be a servant than you ever will from elite athletes. You'll learn a lot from elite athletes, right? But you'll learn a lot from the people that you think are non-elites. And I will say this now, no one is beneath you. As a trainer, as a coach, you're a servant first. And if you think a job is beneath you, the ironic part is you end up being beneath that job. If you're the CEO of a company and you have to clean toilets that day, they better be the cleanest fucking toilets that company has ever seen, right? Because if you think you're too good for a job, you won't do good at that job, and then that job becomes too good for you. So these are lessons I had to learn slowly, because I'm a slow learner, the hard way. So basically, my nut, my acorn, everything you see me do, it boils down to force, okay? Now you're gonna say, wait, there's a lot more to working out than force and exercise. Is there, really? Because power, right? Well, let's speed force, right? No, rate of force production. Well, force is in rate of force production, right? It's force, how fast we can produce it, how we can vector it, right? How we can control it, how we can limit it, how we can manipulate force. So what is force? So you guys are exercise scientists, you're gonna say mass times acceleration. That's cool. I mean, we're exercise scientists, right? I mean, I guess we're kind of scientists. But, so what is force to us? Force to us is load a lot of times, right? What is acceleration to us? Well, to us, we think speed. But that's not quite accurate. So force, muscles don't experience force like we think. They don't experience load. They don't experience a barbell. They don't know if it's a rusty chain, a purple band, a big scary monster, or your sister. They have no idea. They experience tension. Muscles know tension. They don't experience speed either. That's not speed. That is a change in the rate of speed. It's the speeding up and slowing down. So it's two very important things that we have to remember. Muscles don't know what you have in your hand, or if it's in your hand, or if it looks scary or big or rusty, or if it's heavy. All they know is tension, okay? Now, what else affects the tension, the force that a muscle experiences other than load? What else can affect that, right? Two things mainly. Moment arm and lever length, okay? Now, you guys are a smart crowd, but people get confused by moment arm. Moment arm is very simple. It's just the perpendicular distance between the axis and whatever you're lifting in relation to what gravity or whatever the primary vector of force is. So it's usually gravity, but it's not always. So that's moment arm. That's what affects force, not lever length, okay? But does that mean that lever length doesn't matter? Yes, lever length is very important. Why is lever length important? Because lever length affects how quickly the tension increases at the end of that lever. It affects how quickly that moment arm is created and diminished, right? So when you think about it, the longer the lever, if I move this fulcrum 10 degrees, the end of that lever also moved 10 degrees. But that distance for 10 degrees at the end is dependent on how long the lever is. So we always have to keep that in mind when we're talking about tension that muscles experience. What's the moment arm? What's the lever? What is the primary axis of force? Those are three very important things. So you have two athletes, a little bit of a tangent. They're both moving a barbell 1 foot, but that taller athlete had a faster increase in the distance of that moment arm than the shorter athlete did. He experienced more speed in that force calculation than the slower athlete, even though the barbell moved the same distance. These are basic things. So when I talk about stuff later, this is what I pull from. These are the tenets and the principles that I use when I formulate my philosophy. So do not forget that muscles do not experience load, they experience tension. Do not forget that other than load, moment arm and lever length are crucial in trying to dictate and manipulate the physics of your movements. Where is it in the movement that athletes are normally injured? I just got injured and it was at this moment. It's at the amortization phase, right? It's like when we are going down in the eccentric, we're trying to decelerate that load and accelerate it. There's no deceleration, but accelerate it in a different way, right? Okay, it's very dangerous, it's very risky, but it's also very beneficial, right? Our athletes are gonna have to experience this if they wanna perform, right? So this gets us into the two categories that I deal with a lot, because when the kids came in, I had a set of injuries that I saw over and over again. And the coaches had written them off, and they gave them to me, basically. And they said, this kid can either sit on the couch, or that's what the parents said. I was like, no, come in. We're gonna work around it. We're gonna figure out, we're gonna use physics. We're gonna use all this crazy exercises I do, because even though I love the barbell, the coach right now thinks that the barbell is the only thing they can use, and since they can't use the barbell, go home and sit on the couch. I was like, no, we're gonna figure out a way. We're gonna figure out a way using tension and physics to get this athlete to do what we need this athlete to do, even though for right now they can't do a barbell hang clean, okay? So, so that's rehabbing injured athletes. But then their parents would come to see me, and their parents were like, man, I wish I could, do this and that, but I have a degenerative disease, and I'll just never be able to do this. Well, you might not be able to do this exercise, but that doesn't mean we can't work around this exercise, because an exercise is limited, but movements are unlimited, right? So they would come to me and to try to be able to do things that they never thought they could do, knowing full well that that degenerative disease was never gonna heal. I can't fix osteoarthritis in a knee, right? If a knee surgeon botched your knee surgery in 1954, I am not gonna be able to get you to do certain things again. So this is category one, it's their parents. Mitigating the risk for vulnerable recreational athletes. How do we do that? That's what they are, I already covered it. Okay, so first we make a list of the stimuluses that both create improvements in athletic performance, but also create risk, right? So this is the conundrum. The same things that make us also break us, right? So we make a list. Tension, obviously. We need tension, range of motion, right? Speed, eccentric load, stretch reflex, and time under tension are the main ones, right? So this is where I have an issue with people. When they're like, you always need heavy loads. You always need a big range of motion. It's a waste of time because there's no eccentric component. Okay, maybe because there isn't an eccentric component, it's not optimal, okay? But what is optimal? Optimal is contextual, right? What's optimal for one athlete might not be optimal for another. How is it gonna be optimal if what you're doing hurts the athlete, right? So here's my trick, right? Because we all need tricks. When I train vulnerable or at-risk athletes, I very rarely combine more than 2 of those variables together. Usually, it's only 1. So if you wanna make a muscle stronger, at some point in time, you have to put that muscle under a lot of tension, one way or another, right? Very rarely do I do that with a vulnerable athlete with a big range of motion, a fast eccentric, or a big amortization phase, or any amortization phase at all, right? So if it's gonna be a lot of tension, it's gonna be a partial range of motion, and it's gonna be concentric, okay? I don't do a lot of time under tension because time under tension fatigues, and then when it fatigues, their movement patterns break down, and then they become at risk. So I don't do a lot of time under tension with heavy loads. Usually it's with a stable load that they can't hurt themselves with. Sometimes, if it's gonna be a fast motion, it's gonna be light, and it's not gonna be a big range of motion. That doesn't mean I don't work large range of motions, but I do it very light and slow. When I do eccentrics, a lot of times to a dead stop. I understand, I'm an exercise scientist, that fast eccentrics are necessary for athletes to perform optimally. But in order to live a good quality of life for some people, maybe slow eccentrics are more appropriate for that person because it mitigates the risk. It's all about risk mitigation. So with vulnerable athletes, make a list of everything you need to do to get performance out and divide to conquer. Don't ever combine more than 2 factors at once and be smart about it. So other things I adhere to are minimal effective dose, eccentrics. Remember, eccentrics are very important, but they're not vital, okay? If a guy has a knee problem or something like that and the down hurts him, then don't do the down. It's okay to do sled pushes for a while. It's okay to do high resistance bike sprints. It's okay to make the majority of your workout volume, your training volume, concentric or pump in nature. It's okay. You'll find a way to work eccentrics in eventually. The number 6, what tools do I draw on to do this? This goes back to what you see me doing on my Instagram. It's isometrics. How have we forgotten about isometrics? If there's 2 variables in force, and it's mass and acceleration, and one variable we know carries the most risk, which one is it? Acceleration, okay? If we know that one variable carries a lot of benefit but also a lot of risk, why do we start with that variable at all? Isometrics are literally force without movement. So why do we forget that an athlete can push on something very hard at different joint angles and get benefit from it? Why is it very rarely do I see older athletes doing isometrics? Why has this been a forgotten thing? Bands, I love bands. Lots of reasons that I love bands, I'll go into it later. Compression, I don't mean wrapping a joint, I mean squeezing on something, right? Squeeze on something that's squeezing on you back, compression. Variable resistance goes into bands and all that other stuff, very important. And like I said, concentric only training. So there's another category that's related to this, but much different for very reasons. Rehabbing a competitive athlete. Now, what's the difference? A competitive athlete normally has suffered an acute injury. They need to be brought back to very specific performance standards on a timeline, right? So with a performance athlete, a rehabbing athlete, we can't, so sometimes with a degenerative disease, like I just permanently avoid certain movements, okay? Because my job for that guy is to enhance his quality of life, or woman. With an athlete, we can't permanently do this. So at some point in time, we're gonna have to rehab them back to certain very specific performance standards in order to get them playing again. Here are my 6 rules for rehabbing, 6 rules in 5 phases for properly rehabbing athletes. Here are the rules. Keep the injury moving, all right? Don't sit around for a week and let it stiffen up. I know it hurts them, all right? Keep it moving. There are times when you need to immobilize. 90% of the time, you do not need to immobilize an injury. For the lower body, no cleats until stage 5. That's a big one to come in later. The entire rehab process is gonna be painful, okay? We're learning that pain in and of itself has value in rehab, okay? There's gonna be pain, but it has to be moderate pain. So my rule is if it goes over a 2, we need to back off a little bit. But they're gonna be in a 2 of discomfort the entire time. Exercise selection should allow that athlete to back off immediately and safely when they start to feel like the exercise is becoming unsafe. That athlete, it needs to be exercise selection that allows that athlete to self-mitigate the risk. They can't be put in a position when they do it and they feel something go wrong and they can't back off before making that injury worse. That athlete might be on a timeline, but for this rehab process, there is no timeline. They will move through the stages when they meet the performance parameters and they can do everything that's required without pain, okay? So I'm not gonna arbitrarily advance my athlete if they're not ready to because the timetable says so. And the last thing is that these should be done daily or near daily. So there's different factors, right? Intensity, volume, frequency, basically. So at first, the athlete cannot do things with much intensity. They may not be able to do certain things with much volume. So if they can't do those things, they're gonna do them frequently. They're gonna do them almost every day, okay? It doesn't make sense to have an athlete come in twice a week in rehab. They go see a physical therapist once a week and do their physical therapy thing and they sit on the couch the rest of the week. This needs to be a daily thing. You need to give them exercises to when they're not with you, they can and will do those exercises at home. Simple things that they understand. All right, so here are the 5 phases. Phase 1, isometric or contraction only, okay? So contraction only with no speed. So if a muscle is hurt, get it to produce force without moving it. Just get tension there. A lot of times, early phase 1, you're not even pushing on anything, you're simply flexing the muscle, okay? Slow, high rep, lightweight, partial range of motion, all right? So something that doesn't have a lot of tension, you do it for a long time, you do it slowly, a very high rep, it's pain for 10, 20 minutes straight sometimes, but it's very high rep, creates a lot of fatigue in the muscle, and obviously concentric only. All right, phase 2, we increase the isometric intensity. So instead of just contracting the muscle, we have either the athlete achieve a joint angle where the primary vector of force causes them to have to produce a lot of isometric tension, or they start to push on something, preferably something where you can measure how hard they're pushing. We start to do large range of motion pump-only exercises, okay? So start to put that muscle, that injured muscle through it, or tendon through a larger range of motion and get a lot of blood flow in there. And then phase 2 is when we introduce eccentrics to a dead stop, okay? So they can start to do the eccentric, but when they go down, there's no amortization phase, they can set the weight down. All they have to do, they don't have to stop it, all they have to do is slow it down. Phase 3 this is the phase, I'm a speed coach, right? Like, that's how I made my money for the last 13 years, all right? Everything's based around speed for me. So usually it's rehabbing athletes back to a speed sport, and theoretically all sport, almost a speed sport. So this is the phase we start to reintroduce bounce. This is my experience with, like, let's say hamstring rehab, and hopefully this has changed. An athlete injures their hamstring, they go see the trainer. The trainer has them on a bike, and they have them jogging, okay? They do that until those things don't hurt, and then they release them to the team and say, well, try to run. Does that make any sense? So the first thing I do, when they can jog, they never jog. What they do is bouncy jog. They do mini plyometrics. It's mini bounding. They start with bounding, okay? And then I start to introduce simple speed exercise like A-skipping, slow leg cycling, things like that. They start to pull a sled, like heel dig walk, sled around their waist, they dig their heel into the ground, and they pull the sled, still concentric only there, but higher tension. And then this is when I introduce faster concentrics, so like maybe medicine balls from a dead stop on the ground. There's no eccentric, there's no stretch reflex there. Phase 4, this right here is the most dangerous phase, because by the time they've reached phase 4, they're normally 3 to 5 weeks in, and they feel pretty good. They can do a lot of stuff without any indication that that hamstring or hip flexor is injured. Okay, they can jog, they can jump, they can lift weights, right? This is when they think they're good to go and they're not good to go, because the nature of sprinting, the nature of athletics, is that muscle has to produce a large amount of force in a very short amount of time, and that's so specific that nothing other than that event can mimic that demand. This is where they normally get re-injured. This is the phase where you have to be the most careful. So this is when they can do faster eccentrics with a stretch reflex, 3 to 5 weeks in normally. So we're talking about like glute ham developer, down and up really fast, throwing a medicine ball with a stretch reflex, doing weighted jump squats sometimes, things like that, split jumps. So they can normally do all that stuff at this point in time. This is also when I introduce landings. So they'll jump off something and have to produce a lot of force in a hurry on the landing. This is when the high intensity speed drills come in. So I'm talking about leg cycling, from straight leg bounding, alternate leg bounding, backwards sprinting, things like that. Single leg jump tuck sometimes come in this phase, depending on the injury. This is the phase where they can also do heavy lifting, okay? We think heavy lifting and sprinting are very closely related. They're actually not, okay? At this phase, an athlete can probably RDL and Nordic leg curl full go with no pain. And a lot of people mistake that, and they think the athlete's ready to sprint, and they're definitely, let me warn you, they are not ready to sprint yet. But the heavy lifting will help, and this is when they can start to resume heavy lifting, normally 3 to 5 weeks after the initial injury, depending on severity. This is also when I start to do resisted sprinting. So here's a weird thing. Resisted sprinting is harder, but it's safer, and it can actually be used as a rehab tool, because the nature of the resistance slows down the turnover, and it slows down the rate of force production that's necessary for that injured muscle. So I do something that's a little bit counterintuitive. We have a 1080 machine, which is a resisted sprinting machine, and I will hook that athlete up, and the first load they will resisted sprint at, normally weeks 3 to 5, is 15 kilos. They start heavy. And as they progress, I back off on the load. And that backing off on the load allows them to gain a higher velocity. Mind you, they are limited here because if you remember, they are still not wearing cleats, okay? So they're not able to artificially create traction that they might not be able to handle yet. So this phase also, they do get up to sub-maximal effort sprinting, maybe a 10-yard sprint or something like that. Phase 5 is that's the phase where we find out if the athlete is ready to go. So that's the acceleration into near top speed. Now we have an advantage at acceleration because we have high-speed cameras and we have GPS monitoring. So I know what their top speed is in miles per hour, and I know the exact percentage that they get up to and where they get up to that. So I can just cut them off. So you might have to be a little bit more creative with this, kind of eyeballed a little bit, but basically acceleration is to about 90% top speed, okay? Tempo sprints at 90% top speed, holding that run and doing repeated bouts, so building some fatigue and some robustness there. Also, this is the phase where I introduce full speed stopping. So in phase 4, they were practicing the patterns of deceleration, because as we know, hamstring pulls and strains and hip flexors and Achilles, a lot of it happens with the deceleration point. They don't stop appropriately or they're not ready for it. So for some reason, we think we can rehab an injury and without ever having the athlete practice their decelerations or building up robustness in that pattern, but that's just not true. So you have to consciously and deliberately reincorporate stopping as deliberately as you do starting and accelerating. So this is the phase where they are full speed stopping. It's a very important threshold to reach. Now, if they can do all of that stuff, this is my guideline, generally speaking. If they can do all that stuff for 3 days in a row with no pain, I have them rest 1 day, they come back and they attempt a full speed sprint. So I've literally implemented this 5-phase system with hundreds of athletes now. I have had 0 recurring hamstring or hip flexor injuries using this 5-phase, all right? But basically tenets here is you have to be deliberate about it, progressive about it, with the intent of bringing your athlete to full functioning, and know that every step of the way it's gonna be a safe and manageable step with acceptable risk involved. So the same ways that we bring an athlete back from a hamstring injury, we can also bulletproof hamstrings, right? So here's the thing, proper sprint mechanics, all right? This is something like if you're not 100% sure that you know how to properly teach sprinting, learn. Don't learn from a strength coach necessarily unless that strength coach has worked with sprinters, because things you think are right about sprint mechanics may not be right. You do not run with a tall chest. You don't keep your chest and head way up in the air. You don't try to strike the ground as hard as you can all the time, right? There's a way to manage a posture. There's a way to manage your thoracic spine. There's a way to properly arm swing. There's a way to cycle through and strike the ground. So make sure that you know how to teach proper sprint mechanics. I have a love-hate relationship with speed drills because what happened was these were drills that sprint coaches did to prep their sprinters for competition. And everyone else saw that and said, oh, that's cool. And then they have these kids doing these atrocious A skips and B skips. And if you're gonna do that, just have them do jumping jacks, like please. Like you have to pattern the drills properly, all right? A kid should not be punching the ground when he's A skipping, all right? They shouldn't be running with their chest and chin way up in the air, all right? So if you're gonna do the speed drills as part of your prep, learn the speed drills. Nordics, I love Nordics, man. Here's the thing with Nordics. People use it as like a test to like show off how strong their hamstrings are. But the thing is, Nordics can be, and it makes people think that like Nordics are inaccessible because most people can't do that, all right? The cool thing about Nordics is they can be progressed and regressed, all right? You can bend your hips, you can use assistance, you can put the lever further up on the thigh, you can advance Nordics. Nordics are a very essential and crucial hamstring building, eccentrically focused exercise. Leg cycling, scissor skipping, and straight-legged bounding near daily, all right? Like you have to be cycling your legs, you have to be bounding, you have to be skipping almost daily. Those are extensive plyometrics that need to be practiced on a regular basis. It's funny because if you look at like how weightlifters and powerlifters work, they don't just squat once a week. A lot of dudes are squatting daily. But they're very rarely at their max effort day in, day out. Maybe once a week they might squat near that, maybe. But for some reason for sports and sprinting and plyometrics, if you're outside of the track world, we think that you can just go out once a week and sprint. The extensive plyometrics, the extensive leg cycling, the extensive straight-legged bounding and scissor skipping and drills, and the extensive bouncing that doesn't take a lot out of the athlete, that doesn't take much from them to recover from, is crucial to preventing acute injuries in your athletes. They should be doing extensive plyometrics nearly daily. And last thing, like you don't need a big volume of something, but just because you don't need a big volume of something doesn't mean it's not crucially important. You don't need to do a lot of full speed sprints. And if you're having your athletes do 40/40s, those aren't full speed sprints, okay? Reach top speed once a week. That's kind of my guideline. At least once a week, your athlete should be reaching greater than 95% of their top speed. Make sure they do it. If they do that, if they just do that one thing alone, that is gonna severely reduce the occurrence of acute muscular lower body injuries. So here's what I hear the most of. You don't need bands. You don't need all this stuff. You just need free weights. That's true. If all you have is free weights, I would agree with you. It's all you need, right? Because we have to be adaptable, okay? When I was in Iraq, we were at, every third week we'd go to Hawija, which is a shithole town, even by Iraqi standards. And we had taken over this prison. So we'd be, 1 week out of the month, we'd be for a week straight in this prison. And the weight room was literally a prison cell that we made a makeshift pull-up bar. No bench. We had 1 barbell and 185 pounds of weight for it. We had our body armor. There was no airflow, 130 degrees, and we got in there and made it happen. Like, if that's all you have, yeah, that's all you need. You can make anything happen with anything, okay? But we have these tools. And if you're gonna shut your mind and close off to all the other tools we have at our disposal, then you're limiting yourself and you're limiting your athletes. Don't be dogmatic, okay? It's good to have philosophies and tenets, right? We should have that. Don't let your philosophies and your tenets turn into your dogmas, okay? Philosophies and tenets are intended to be ground from which we can move forward on. Dogmas are literally cells, walls that we build around ourselves that prevent movement, okay? So be very mindful, is this one of my philosophies, or is this a dogma that I blindly adhere to? And is it preventing me from learning, and is it keeping my eyes shut to what else might be out there? So every one of these has been, they're like the Avengers, man. Yeah, they work well on their own, they work even better together. Why do I use bands? So bands are kind of like the Spider-Man of like the Avengers, right? Like the friendly neighborhood bands, like they don't get the respect they deserve, in my opinion. I got another funny story. I'm in Gold's one time. I'm kind of in a bad mood that day, you know? And I've got 135 pounds in the bar. I've got these two little innocent looking, and they're always like these like lavender or purple, or pink bands, these two little 1-inch bands on either side of this barbell. And I know based on having done it before that, a 1-inch band stretched 6 feet, has about 80 pounds if it's fresh of pressure on both sides, right? So dumb math, I'm like, well, this is about 240 pounds of weight or something that's on this bar. And there's a dude next to me squatting, and I just look at him, I was like, there's no way this dude can squat over 200 pounds, save his life. And he looks over and he's like, that's pretty cool, I want to try it out. And I'm like, normally I'd be like, nah, bro, I don't think you should. I'll be like, fucking have at it, bro. And he gets it off and it just crushes him into the ground. And I'm like, I felt bad afterwards, but like, don't underestimate bands. They don't have that cool factor. You don't get that prison street cred that you do with chains. But bands can be an extremely valuable tool in your program, all right? Get like dark colored ones or something, I don't know. All right, so why do I use them? It's easy to adapt them to any movement, all right? So you can loop a band around a pole, you can loop it over a barbell, you can attach it to a kettlebell. You can use a band in conjunction with a lot of things, which it's hard to do that with chains, okay? They allow for grip variance. This is an important one. So if your hands hurt, or if a certain portion of a range of motion causes pain, right? So let's say I can retract my scapula supinated and it doesn't hurt. But as I start to go here, if I leave my hand supinated, it starts to hurt different things. Well, the band, because the nature of the band, unlike a barbell, will let you rotate at any point in that range of motion to create space and alleviate or mitigate some of the pain that you experience when you work out, right? Also, you don't need to grab a band with your hand. You can put your hand through it and use your wrist for a lot of the support and literally grab it even if like you're missing a couple fingers, things like that. So they allow for a lot of grip variance. Another one is just simple, man. It has nothing to do with the elastic capabilities of a band. They can just simply extend the range of cables. So I can do a lot of things with cables by attaching a band to it that I couldn't normally do. So they just extend range of a cable machine. This is a big one. It's kind of hard to explain, but levers and fulcrums go together, right? You can't have a lever without a fulcrum, right? The fulcrum affects the vector, okay? If you have a lever, the vector of force is dependent on where that fulcrum is in the movement. The cool thing about bands is halfway through that movement, I can create a new fulcrum and change vector halfway through a movement, which is very hard to do with other implements. So literally, as I pull on a band and the vector's this way, I can use my hand sometimes or another object. I can create another fulcrum and I can create a different vector halfway through that movement. So bands are very adaptable because they can create fulcrums for you. Another one is it reduces force at end range, which is kind of like, it's related to variable resistance, but a lot of times going through a 4-range of motion hurts, but if you can deload at a certain point in that range of motion, you can alleviate pain and still get the benefit of a 4-range of motion and without causing or exacerbating an injury. Another thing that's cool about bands is when you first pull on a band, it's gonna give. And sometimes that's a drawback, but when you think about it, when you pull on an object when you're in a strong position and you can use other body parts to create momentum, that object accelerates faster, which if you're hurt, maybe not a good thing. But also when you reach the mid stage of that range of motion, you're not experiencing the same force because the momentum has built up. So on occasion, but not always, bands can be a good thing because they reduce the rate of acceleration so that when you get to a mid-range in the movement, you still experience a significant amount of force through that entire range of motion. So it's just a good add-on rather than always trying to accelerate a weight quickly from where you're the strongest. Portable, can't take chains everywhere. Sorry guys, I wish you could. You can put them in your backpack, take them on vacation. You can take, I do this all the time for clients. They go on vacation, I give them 3 bands. With the 3 different thicknesses, they can do 400 different exercises with that. And they can anchor them to anything, they can take them anywhere, they're very lightweight and portable. And I hate the term dynamic isometrics, but it's kind of an oxymoron. But here's the thing, we have these machines where you can measure isometric tension, right? They can push on something really hard. And you think you're pushing at the same amount the entire time on something that's not moving, but you're actually not. The force you produce fluctuates, and we'll see it. It'll spike, they'll fatigue, and it'll go down, but you can't tell because they still think they're pushing hard, that thing's not moving, right? The cool thing about bands is you can do an isometric band and it's constant resistance back the other way. So that person gets constant feedback because the minute that their CNS or their nervous system lets off just a little bit, that band will move their hand, all right? So bands are a good tool to supplement for isometrics. That's basically why I use bands. They all have different benefits and drawbacks, okay? These are some of the reasons. I love free weights. I love free weights because they're portable, and they're portable intra-facility. So you can't take a cable stack across the weight room, okay? But you can take kettlebells, dumbbells, and barbells across, so you can bring it next to something else you want to work on. They're very portable. They're fairly cheap. You can do a ton of stuff with them. So I don't hate free weights. I love free weights. I love all of this stuff. Here's something that's going to be controversial, but free weights aren't really free, okay? Say, use free weights because then you're not locked into a range of motion. You can go with your natural biomechanics. No, you can't. No, you can't. What are free weights the prisoner of? Gravity, physics. You can't move a barbell any way you want. The force that you put on a barbell has to be consistent with the forces experienced in your environment, or bad shit is gonna happen. Free weights aren't free. That doesn't mean they're not bad. They're very good. That's one of the reasons why they're good. A barbell actually isn't a natural way to move. You know, we invented a barbell, right? A barbell is not just a stick, just like a wheel is not just a circle. I love it when people are like, they laugh at people like, well, that was before the invention of the wheel, like those people are stupid. I'm like, oh, okay. Could you invent a wheel? You know, a wheel isn't a circle, right? Could you invent spokes? Could you invent the axle? No. A barbell is cool because it lets us move a whole lot of weight because it spins, right? If that barbell didn't have that little thing on it, we couldn't hang clean 500 pounds because we'd have to turn the diameter there would have to be turned by the diameter here. It wouldn't work. That's why it's so much harder to log clean than it is to barbell clean. That's how we can lift an inordinate amount of weight with a barbell, which sometimes that's a very good thing, sometimes it's not a good thing. So barbell isn't a natural way to move. I hate to break it to you. It's cool. I love barbells. It is not the most simplest implement out there, and it's not the most natural. And it's also not free. Here's the other side of that coin. Machines free you up. That doesn't mean I like machines better than barbells. I want to be clear about this. But it also means I don't hate machines and don't vilify machines. Like machines, they move on a predetermined path. Okay, yeah, that's where they're moving. That's the resultant force. The cool thing about a machine is you can have subtle variances in how you're pushing on that handle or cable or whatever that is, as long as it's on a predetermined track, and it will still move in the same direction. So let's say you have an injury, and in order to move that weight on this path, you have to activate a stabilizer muscle that at that point in time is torn. So if I want to do an overhead press, and I don't want that dumbbell to fall on my head or my feet, I have to activate my external rotators, right? Which a lot of times that's a very good thing. But what if I want to get the benefits of a press and I don't want to activate my external rotators? Well, with a machine, I can apply internal rotation pressure and press, and that still moves on the same path. So machines can free you up. Machines stabilize you so you can exert an inordinate amount of force on a muscle, which sometimes that's a good thing. They also free you up to some degrees on certain occasions. Selectorized ones are very efficient. You can change weights easily. I know it's cool to load 1,500 pounds on a weight press. Sometimes you just move a pin. It's a lot faster and easier. You don't get the bro points, especially if like it's a pin and you got a purple band on it. Still fucking hard though, right? Your muscles don't know. Your muscles don't know you just moved a pin. Your muscles don't know you just moved 1,500 pounds into a sled. Everybody else in the gym might give you props for it, but your muscles don't care. Tension is tension to them. Okay, moving on. I get a lot of questions about speed training. Why do I advocate speed training for adults? I'm kind of passionate about this one. So as we get older, we do everything we possibly can to hang on to our youth. Think about it. We literally inject poison into our faces. We get fake boobs, fake butts, take exogenous hormones, everything we can do. What is the one defining factor of youth? What is the one thing your parents are always yelling at kids about? Stop running, right? That's the one thing. And they don't open the front door of the house and like, Johnny, stop running at the same pace around the block for an hour, right? Do you have to yell at kids not to jog for an hour? So if we're trying to stay young, why do we stop doing the one thing that defines youth the minute we can? That makes no sense to me. Studies have shown it literally makes us genetically younger. Old adult sprinters have longer telomere lengths than non-sprinters. The copy of the copy that fades over time literally stays longer. At the genetic level, we are younger. So don't think of sprinting as sprint training, think of it as CNS training, okay? Sprinting is the tide that raises all ships, okay? If you can put out a stronger CNS signal, everything else is gonna function better along with it. Can we all agree on that? There's nothing better in this world, nothing, to stimulate your CNS than a full speed sprint, okay? You ever see like old white people dance? It's not fucking pretty, is it? Okay. If a kid comes in and he doesn't have rhythm, I'll figure out a way, but it's gonna be hard to teach him how to sprint, okay? Sprinting, like I said, is about force, right? Everything's about force. So scientists look at the force you put into the ground and say, that's all that matters, okay? Well, that's what results from what happens, but the force that you put into the ground, what's the vector, first of all, is a force applied in the right direction, and that is what your body produced. So in order for that force to be produced, the antagonist muscles have to be relaxed at the exact appropriate moment. Sprinting is as much about sequencing and relaxing and being fluid and having rhythm as it is about producing force on one muscle at a time. That's why bodybuilders look like shit when they sprint. Have you ever seen a bodybuilder that looks good sprinting? I've never seen a bodybuilder that looks good sprinting, okay? Because they're just used to doing the same motion at the same tempo and not having to worry about relax. All they have to do is worry about producing tension, which has value in small doses. I like to bodybuild, you know? It keeps us supple, so we have to relax when we sprint. Like, I warm up my kids, but I don't need to, honestly. Really, the warm-up for them, it teaches them pattern, and it gives me a chance to talk to them and figure out what they've been doing during the week. But honestly, the kids younger than 12 years old, they could walk in the door and full-speed sprint, and 99 times out of 99, they'd be fine. I don't know if I've ever had a 10-year-old pull a muscle. I'm sure it happens. Usually when 10-year-olds get hurt, it's when a force that comes from the outside is put upon them. It's not because they jumped too high and they couldn't handle the landing. It's usually they wreck their bike, they're in a car wreck, something like that. Like their nervous system won't really let them get injured, and also they're supple because they get up every day and they sprint. They move around, they tumble, they roll. Sprinting and change of direction agility work will keep us supple. So when we have to produce a lot of energy in a hurry with little notice, we don't pull something, okay? How functional are you if you can deadlift 900 pounds, but if a kid's across the street about to get hit from the car, you can't run across the street to save them without pulling your back out, all right? Sprinting, plyometrics, agility work, adults, it keeps us supple, it keeps us ready to go without a 45-minute warm-up. That being said, I'm old, I still warm up for 45 minutes. Slow things die bad, man. Like, slow things die, all right? They die instantaneously through violence, and then they sit down, they wither, and they die. Fast things don't die, not as often. I saw it in combat. If you slow, you're dead, all right? You sit down and stop moving. I read this study once. They did all these tests on people to try to predict mortality rates. The one test that they figured out, and they wouldn't tell them they were doing this, they would ask them to get up and go get a pencil from across the room and bring it back, and they'd time them. And the people that did that faster lived longer. Stay fast, don't die, basically. So when you're an adult sprinter, what do you think? All right, first of all, you don't have to full speed very often, or maybe even at all, to get most of the benefits of full speed sprinting. I think it was covered before. So you get, first of all, posture, all right? With sprinting, you practice the ups. Everybody wants to strike hard. Just like with lifting, you do the downs first, right? If you want to do a chin-up, you work the eccentric first. Sprinting is kind of the opposite. If you want a pattern right going into the ground, learn to lift your leg in the right pattern first. Because if you pattern the up, then the down is going to usually take care of itself, okay? Posture, tall hips, neutral pelvis, ribs in, all right? None of this chest up bullshit. No anterior pelvic tilt when you sprint. All of this stuff you should know, right? Practice the posture. Then do the ups, then mobility. You don't need to pull your head over your leg, but if you can't achieve a basic amount of mobility, you're not gonna be able to get in the positions you need to. Practice your rhythm, practice your timing, easy bouncing, easy tempo. Listen to the rhythm of your foot strike. And after that, listen to music. It's about rhythm and timing. Use it as a dance. Like, be an athlete. Bounce. You should bounce every day. I don't care. I mean, easy bouncing, jump rope, do something. You should bounce almost every day. Underspeed, a lot of underspeed resistance work. Hill sprints, if you don't have machines, band sprinting, things like that. It's a little bit more advanced. Make sure you're warmed up and ready for that stuff first. And remember, like sprinting, harder isn't better, okay? I know you probably teach your kids to strike the ground, and for some people, especially elite athletes, that works well. But for my slower athletes and my adults, it works better if I tell them to pull on the ground. Pull first. Pull in the right direction, pull at the right spot, and as you get stronger, that pull turns into a punch, okay? Pull first, and then when you're done pulling, when you can't pull on the ground anymore, don't raise your chest up. Let your hips come forward. Letting your hips come forward will raise your chest up, and then you turn that pull into a whip. There's no punching, okay? It's pull to whip. Pull on the ground, pull faster, get your posture, start to whip the ground. Whip from the hip. You've heard that before, right? Tempo repeats. I hear like you can't expect to run fast if you don't run fast. Like people have actually said like it's pointless to sprint under full speed. That's bullshit. Elite sprinters sprint under full speed all the time. Tempo repeats. Practicing your pattern at 80 to 90% of your full speed. Do it over and over again. Get that volume in. All right? And then if you do that and you're good and you put in the work, fucking just Leroy Jenkins it. Go out and get it. Right? See what happens. Okay, last thing. I don't know how I'm doing. Probably over. But, listen, everything's contextual. Okay? I don't deal with elite populations. I don't deal with elite athletes. This would not be appropriate for Texas A&M or Florida State. Okay? But with certain populations, keep things simple. People need a structure. Okay? It doesn't have to be exactly scientifically right or perfect, but they need a structure, even if it's arbitrary. So this is the structure I use with my adult athletes. When they ask me how I structure my workouts, this is what I tell them, even though it's not always this way for me. All right, slow. What do people do when they warm up? They mindlessly go through motions, lightweight, fast, right? They jog. Jogging is a horrible way to warm up, or they do jumping jacks. Slow starts with isometrics maybe. If you have joint pain, get into that position and hold it till it doesn't hurt anymore. And then maybe do some pulsation at that joint angle. Maybe gradually hold isometrics at increasing joint angles. And whatever you do, slow. Get your mind into the movement first. When you do your lunges, do very slow, mindful lunges. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Move well before you move more, okay? So slow first, and then flow. So all this crazy stuff you do, all those flows, what those really are movement pattern practicing. It's sequencing. So if you look at sports, there's certain commonalities, right? A golf swing, a football throw, a javelin throw, those look like drastically different things, throwing a punch, but there are so many commonalities between those movements, it's ridiculous. All the flows are, it's taking that basic common movement pattern. Basically, you're in a low position, your weight is stacked over one side, your feet are knife-edged into the ground, and then as you throw, it happens in sequence. You don't rotate everything at once when you throw, it's a sequence, it's a pattern. So I call them flows because it's simple, but really all it is movement, sequence, pattern practicing, okay? So what happens is whatever you do when you go to throw, something has to rotate. Internal rotation of your back leg. Your hips come first, it creates torque, right? You use that torque, you finish through, you fall through. That's a sequence and a pattern. All the flows are, and there's different variations that have subtle differences. I do them faster and slower through different vectors. All it does is it practices pattern. That's all that is. So that's the flow. So if you see me doing the weird bandy stuff, that's what I'm doing. I'm practicing my patterns. And coincidentally, it keeps you athletic. It's also a very fast and efficient way to get prepped for your workout. And then it comes the go. So the go is simply all your athletic movements. So start with easy jumping, going into more aggressive jumping, and then weighted jumping, things that incorporate your core, single arm push-ups, total body movements, cleans, that's the go, okay? There's a lot of different versions of go, but that's the go. It's the athletic movements, okay? Now, if you were to stop there, 90% of us would be fine. Because in every category, it's not like that one category only carries benefits for that one category, right? You do get strength benefits from the slow. You do get strength benefits from the flow, right? You get strength benefits from the go. So you're getting strength benefits from all of those. It's not optimal, but it's there, right? This is stimulus. Then after those three, I go into the grow. So it's not really grow size, it's grow strength. So these are the heavy normal compound lifts, okay? So what I normally like to do, my workouts, because I take my time, normally it lasts like an hour and a half. I spend between 5 to 15 minutes in each category. So I don't spend 45 minutes going through my flows. It's not what people think, okay? So once I get to the grow, that's the normal stuff. As normal as I can make it based on my movement limitations. That's the normal compound lifts. That's the good stuff, right? The strength stuff. I still value it. It's not like I don't value tension and muscles. And you don't need free weights for this. You only need tension. Our free weights are great. But if you want to do a heavy press or squat on a machine, it's still tension. It still adds value. And then at the end, because, if I ever have to take my shirt off, I want to look good, the show. It's the bodybuilding stuff. It's the pump. It's fine. It's not the devil, all right? So you can do your tricep extensions, do your lateral raises, do your curls if you want to. That's how I structure my workouts, and I recommend it for other people as well. So it's very simple. It's not too scientific. They're not going to get confused with it. It gives them structure. It gives them something to follow. What is my fitness philosophy? So basically, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what my fitness philosophy is, okay? Because it's mine. So when we go to hire people, it takes forever to hire people, acceleration, and they tell me who they follow, who their guru is, what philosophy they adhere to. That's a big red flag for me, because then you're just a copy of a copy. How good can you possibly be, right? We should all, as trainers and coaches, have our own philosophy, right? Now, we should pull from all other philosophies. It shouldn't just be from zero, but we should make our own philosophy. If I ask you what your philosophy is, you should be able to tell me your philosophy. It should be unique to you. You can tell me who's influenced you, that's fine, all right? Family Guy, for me, I get a lot of that from Family Guy. But, but I do have certain things. So I live my life, I like things in threes, right? So accountability, resiliency, and gratefulness, okay? Own up. Find your role in what happened to you, okay? If you weren't the cause of it and you can't affect it, I'm gonna ask you one thing. Can you affect it? Can you change your environment to affect what affected you? If not, don't worry about it. I don't wanna hear about it. It's accountability. Accountability is taking ownership. It's not blaming yourself. Accountability is taking ownership, okay? It's a good thing. Because then when you take ownership of your present, you can control your future. Resiliency, things are gonna happen, all right? Learn from them. Don't give up, all right? People that win, they just don't give up until they win. Gratefulness. Every day we have something to be grateful about, okay? Every day wake up and say 5 things you're grateful for, all right? No matter how bad your situation is, there's so many situations that's worse, and you should be grateful. When I hurt my quad, first of all, it's not that bad. Thanks for asking. I'm a big pussy. But you know what? I'm grateful that the other legs didn't hurt. And it makes me grateful for when it does heal, which will be soon. It reminds me how grateful I should be when my quad is healed, because it doesn't always have to be this way, right? I can walk around and not experience pain and not be grateful for that. That's crazy to me, right? The quad injury is a good thing because it reminds me to be grateful, right? The last thing, when I was a linebacker in Truman State, and this was literal at the time, but I've used it for more metaphorical, I had something taped to my locker, and it said patience, angles, and aggression. So when the game played, before every play, I would say that in my head and remind me, patience, right? You can't just fucking run around. You have to see what's happening first. You have to be patient. You have to sit first, right? So in the military, it's like SILS, right? Sit, look, listen, smell. Like, don't just go into a linear danger area. Find out what's around you first. Okay, so the worst thing a linebacker can get, the ball snapped, he hops up and he like gets close to the line of scrimmage, right? No, be patient. See the play first, all right? Then it's angles, okay? Once you see what's happening, make a plan and attack with the right angle, okay? It goes back to the shortest distance between 2 points and all that kind of stuff. If my angle isn't appropriate, if my plan isn't good, bad things are gonna happen, right? And only after those 2 things are in place, I've showed patience, I've chosen the perfect angle, then it's aggression. Then I finish through, okay? Patience, angles, and aggression. You can be patient, you can see the angle, but if you don't follow through and finish with aggression, bad things are gonna happen. Those things need to be in place in that order for success in anything in life. Those are the 3 things that got me through football, and they're the things that get me through life. See it, make a plan, and finish with aggression. And the cool thing is, the more you practice that, the less patience you'll need, because the faster you'll start to recognize things. The less planning you'll have to do, because the angle will become instinctual. The aggression will become instinctual. Not being aggressive will feel weird to you. So if I had to boil down like the 6 things I live my life with, it's accountability, resilience, and gratefulness, patience, angles, and aggression. So I appreciate y'all's time. I know I probably went over. Does anybody have questions? I don't want to disrespect Bert's time though. So.
I had one. So you mentioned like frequent exposures to cycling, straight leg skip, sprinting. Is it worth it for a sport that's in, like let's say a field sport, in season to build in extensive plyos into the warm every day, or do you let the sport practice take care of that?
Every day. Because what happens is they're not experiencing those stressors in their sport, right? They're not experiencing cycling actually very often, or necessarily bouncing. You know what I mean? It has to be a deliberate thing, and it doesn't take much energy or time either. So it's 5 to 10 minutes a day, and it wires in the things they're going to do. Because remember, I'm an advocate of full speed sprinting, right? And they can only do that maybe once a week. So yes, I think it's crucial during the season and to do that, even more so probably. So people think like you can't, when I say you can't sprint very often, they're like, what about soccer players? Soccer players probably never reach full speed in a game, maybe once. And football players very rarely. That doesn't mean it's not important. It means you have to add that in, okay? Yeah, totally. Anybody else? You know, like the Feed the Cats guy, Olympic sprinter coaches, things like that. Maybe I misspoke. But if your strength coach shows that they clearly don't have any interest in sprint mechanics, like go to somebody that does. You know what I mean? There's a lot of great strength coaches out there that know a lot about speed training, so that wasn't accurate. But yeah, you make sure that your strength coach or whoever you listen to has an interest in sprint mechanics and expresses verbally the importance of good mechanics. Because some strength coaches, literally I've heard this, are like, you know, you can't teach speed. Kids run good naturally. We don't just run full speed, you'll learn to sprint. That is not right. Trust me, I've seen it. I've seen it in slow motion about 50,000 times. Anybody else? Guys, I really appreciate you letting me speak today. I feel a little bit outclassed by the people who came before me. And it's like,